Hello and welcome to Tokyo Inklings. This is episode 7. My name is CY, and you can find me at tokyostationpens.com or at Tokyo Station Pens on Instagram.
And my name is Jacob, and I'm Fudafan on Instagram, and I have a blog at fudafan.com.
Okay, so before we start this podcast, this isn't a politics podcast, so we don't want to spend the next hour talking about it, but we want to recognize and acknowledge that many people are hurting from what's happening around the world globally. We, the hosts of this podcast, have a very simple stance. Racism is wrong, police brutality is wrong, and there's no exceptions to that. And that being said, Jacob, how have things been going for you?
Okay, that's an interesting segue. So things are good here. So as you know, we met up yesterday. As things are opening up here, we can talk more about that in a moment. I have been shopping as I usually do. Let me get right into that actually. So I have been on Yahoo Auctions. I found a Sailor Prophet. I think it's a Sailor Prophet with an 18K nib. In a good condition with one of those old style engravings for a fantastic price. And the reason why I was interested in that one is that Sailor doesn't make these 18K nibs anymore, right? At least you cannot buy a Sailor branded pen with these nibs. So I'm not sure what's up with that, but you can get a Montegrappa or a Cross or a Davidoff with an 18K nib. So Sailor makes nibs for them, but you cannot buy a Sailor branded pen today with an 18K nib, right? I'm not sure when they stopped or why they stopped, but at least I remember that up until fairly recently you could get these YY Pen Club pens with 18K nibs. But the standard Sailor line, that was a while ago, I think. So I was a bit curious about these nibs. I wanted to try them for myself. And as I did some research on this pen and this nib, I found one of those cryptic Japanese blogs where they post about this pen and this nib. And the author claimed that these nibs are actually more flexible, or in Japanese terms more shinaru, than modern 21K nibs. But the reasoning was very interesting because he said it's because of the engraving. So his argument was that this old style engraving with these arch over the 1911 marks somehow makes the nib more bouncy. I'm not sure if there's any truth to that whatsoever. My material science knowledge is limited, to say the least. But at least it was an interesting theory and something I hadn't heard before. So you're more into nibs and you have more experience with that. But what would you say about that theory?
I think that theory is it's a bit rubbish because you have also 14K and 21K nibs in the same engravings. And we know that the 14K, you got one with the music nib as well, didn't you? Those are not any softer.
Those are still stiff. Yeah, that's for sure.
Right. So if anything, those nibs are even stiffer than what we have now. Even the 14K versus 14K, if we stay within the same carats, those are even stiffer than the 14Ks that Sailor are putting out now. So I seriously doubt those claims. I don't think they hold water. What I think is much more likely is that Sailor, throughout their various iterations of nib making, have been changing the types of alloys that they've used. So when actually Sailor was the first, let's say, of the modern big three, Sailor was the first company, the first manufacturer to be established in 1911. So they're a few years older than Platinum or Pilot. And back in the day, everybody made 14K nibs. The only reason why you would make an 18 karat nib is if you were selling to the French-speaking and Benelux countries, because legally speaking, in those countries, you couldn't market something as gold unless it was at least 18K.
Right. I remember hearing about that,
So that's why, for example, on Mont Blancs, you see that in the same era, 149s were made in both 14K and 18K, but the 18K we know are for the French market. Same as Wall Eversharps, actually, US companies as well. I have a adjustable 18 karat nib from Wall Eversharp that was marketed to the French-speaking countries. So the history of the nibs is that kind of everybody started with the 14 karat. But as I think post-war, as these companies grew and evolved, there was this kind of race to try to put as much carats, or rather to increase the purity of the gold in the nibs as much as possible. And I think for these companies it was let's say more feasible because Pilot, Sailor, Platinum, they were all dabbling back then in these pocket pens.
Small, like thumbnail nibs or what they call, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So I think those were the first ones in Japan, at least, to sport, let's say, like 18K nibs, and then you gradually had 21K nibs. It wasn't just Sailor back then, and then you had even 22K nibs. And I know of a Danitrio, I believe, that has a 24 karat nib.
Yeah, I know that this is something that Tsunami-san wrote about in his book about the fountain pens, and our good friend Bruno has also written about this on his blog, Estilographica's, about this, at least in Japan, these gold wars, how they one-up each others with higher gold concentration.
Yeah. And so Danitrios are not made in Japan. And so they're usually very forthright with this. They're not made in Japan. I think this pen, the Yokozuna, is the only Danitro nib that had a Japanese-made nib, and that is 24 karat, which is 100% gold. So in the case of the 18 karat nib, I believe Sailor, as I mentioned earlier, they went through various iterations of alloys to test and experiment with different alloys in order to, let's say, make their manufacturing more profitable. And we also know that, for example, Sailor has, as we spoke last time, bought these gold bars from Pictet. Right, so those will have a different alloy than to whatever they've made in the past. The 18K, the 14K, the S nibs and the H nibs will have had different alloys, and now with the 21 karat gold standard nibs will have a different alloy.
And you usually say that, from a nib grinder's perspective, you tend to prefer the 14K one over the ones with higher gold concentration because they're easier to modify, right? Especially if you want to do something like cutouts or faceless mods and something like that, right?
Well, particularly if you're going to grind away at the material of the nib itself, I think, and I think it's let's say, commonly accepted that 14 karat is, let's say, a good balance between gold and alloy.
Right.
And as far as I know, most people only, if they're trying to flexify gold, they only work with 14 karat nibs, because we understand how it would react. That doesn't mean, however, that every brand's 14 karat nib can be suitable for flexifying. And I found that Mont Blanc in particular is not very suitable for flexifying in terms of their alloy. Platinum as well is not very good for flexifying. But Pilot, their alloy that they use is quite soft, and therefore it's very easy to play with, and it has quite a nice snapback even if you do remove some of the thickness of the material. But if we're talking about just grinding the tipping, then the carat doesn't really matter so much. It's more about the tipping material. And again, I think Pilot's tipping material is very good. I heard on the Leaky Nib, when they interviewed Gina from Custom Nib Studio, when she went to Pilot to their factories, that they were making even their own tipping material.
Oh, really?
Yeah, whereas some other companies or manufacturers, they buy tipping material. So I thought that was really interesting. And you can tell if you've ground, let's say, Pilot nibs versus Platinum nibs, you can, I think, in my experience, the Platinum tipping is clearly much softer.
I've heard that too from nib grinders, that the general prefer to working with Pilot nibs. So that's
Yep.
Seems to be a common opinion.
I know that some grinders in the States really like to work with Sailor tipping. Sailor tipping is pretty decent as well. I'd say, yeah, Sailor and Pilot have really good tipping. Mont Blanc has good tipping, but they're quite special in the sense that they do that upturn style nib, whereas I've had some issues with Pelican and Platinum.
So going back to this Sailor nib, one thing I've enjoyed recently, and I'm probably partially influenced by you, I've been enjoying buying these sort of old rusty pens with fully functioning nibs in good condition, and then I take those nibs and stick it on another pen. So as I think you mentioned previously on this podcast, these smaller Sailor Gold nibs fit more or less perfectly on a pen that takes number 5 nibs, and the larger ones are
correct.
As I did this time, I took this 18K nib and I stuck it on a pen that takes Jovo number 6 size nibs, and I didn't need to do an adapter or anything else. It just worked.
Correct. It just works. And the Sailor nibs are a bit longer than Platinum nibs. Platinum nibs tend to be a little bit loose in the Jovo 6 housings, but Sailor's just works.
But aren't the Platinum nibs also a little bit more flat?
Yes, they're a bit more flat, but I haven't found that to be too much of an issue. Honestly, I think the Sailor nibs are more, as you say, adapted to the curvature of the Jovo feed. But with the Platinums, you can easily heat set either an ebonite or a plastic feed. One thing to note, though, I think, which is quite interesting, is if you buy a Naginata nib, those only come in the L size.
Right.
Which means that all of those, if you buy from Sailor Naginata nibs, should fit on Jovo 6 housings.
Right.
So, with that being said, Jacob, your 18K nib, is it actually a bit bouncy?
I would say it is, but I'm also wondering if that is because of years of use, because I don't know how old this nib is. We talked in the last episode about this date stamp you have, which only gives you the last digits of the year, so you can't really tell how old it is unless you know exactly when this model was made. So I don't know how old it is, but if it's been used for decades, then maybe it's gotten softer over time.
I think I would date your pen to be around, let's say, the 80s. Yeah, 80s I think is a reasonable guess.
So have you done any shopping recently?
I have more than I should. So I am getting into this safety pen kind of let's say phase in my life. I bought 2 safety pens, and for those who are listening to the podcast who are unaware, safety pens are the first pens, I believe, with retractable nibs. So the idea is that when pens were first made, they were all eyedropper pens, because you dump in the ink into the body and then you go. The problem with those eyedropper pens is that because the sealing technology wasn't very advanced, they were easily leakable. So what manufacturers did was that they made these pens where the threading was at the top of or the very front of the section. So the entire barrel is kind of a section, and then you have obviously threads in the cap at the very top, and the nib retracts into the body. So when you cap the pen, the section, now it's nibless, it presses up against the top of the cap and it seals the pen. And supposedly, because the nib is always submerged in ink, even when not in use, you can use more, let's say, fast drying inks, such as pigmented inks, cause less trouble. Some people even say that you can use India ink. I'm not going to try with my pens because I'm not going to mess with that. But I got this Mont Blanc Simplo number 4, which is quite long. It's actually the size of a full-size pen. And It's got this beautiful marbling that's going on. I bought this from eBay, and it took about 3 to 4 weeks to arrive. So it seems that shipping into Japan is still kind of running. But the problem with shipping now is that even though it works, let's say the parcel has to get on a commercial flight. In Japan right now, there are 5 to 6 commercial flights a day to very specific destinations. So if I send a package out to the US and we don't have any direct flights to the US, then my package gets set on another flight, let's say, I don't know, to India or something. So it flies to India, and then India flies to France, and then from France to the UK, and then the UK to the US. So it's making more stops. And so the shipping issue is still not resolved, but I'm very lucky to have gotten this. It's a nice little pen.
Yeah,
you saw it yesterday, right? Yeah, it's got a nice little nib on it. I did a quick restoration of this pen because it didn't come in perfect shape. But I'm starting to understand a bit those old collectors. I'm a bit hesitant about inking this guy up.
Oh, that is very unlike you.
Yeah, so I haven't inked it up yet. Also because I want to make sure that it doesn't leak. So far, it's been very good. I've just put water in it, but I have to say where I differ from Bruno is that I might get this lacquered.
Yeah, that would be controversial.
Yeah, so that was the first one. The second one I got is a safety pen from Italy.
From Italy, okay.
So, safety pens were quite common in the US. I think they were a US invention. But they got really, really popular in Europe, funnily enough. So, particularly Waterman. So Moore also made some safety pens with a different design, but Waterman came out with these safety pens and exported them into Europe. And they became this huge phenomenon. And particularly in Italy, they started to make these gold overlays for these Waterman safety pens. And so there are all these pens with beautiful and really intricate overlays that they carve from gold and silver, sometimes even sapphires. They put like gemstones on them. And they got really popular. The one that I have is by a company called Columbus, which wasn't Waterman, but is very Waterman-esque in terms of construction and design. And this one I got from Letizia. So I had to polish it up a bit after it came. But, I think when I showed you, you commented that it looks like it should be in some kind of a museum or something.
Yeah, definitely. It looks
like
it's not exactly your EDC pen.
No, it's like a Game of Thrones pen. But it's quite nice. Unfortunately, the shopping didn't end there.
Okay.
So I found on Yahoo Auctions, as I do, this another Pentanoto Rialo. So this is the Honto no Hoshizora.
I remember seeing that one on Yahoo Auctions.
Yeah. I think it's a limited 50 pieces run. And this is actually quite similar to the other one that we talked about a few weeks ago. But instead of being translucent, it's this kind of bright blue with these shimmers on it. And I don't know, it's great. It's beautiful.
So you're into Sailor Rialos now, it's safe to say.
I'm into Sailor Rialos. I'm not sure what to do with the nib yet because it's a HM. So... either make it a fude or something, but I haven't decided yet. But they're nice pens. I have a few.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, the shopping doesn't end there. I got the Kingdom Note Kaoru.
Oh, really?
So it's not for me. It's for somebody else, but as we mentioned last time, this Kingdom Note Kaoru is quite striking because the solid colors, although they contrast, they don't fight with each other as some of the previous Kingdom Notes tended to do. So this one was really pretty. But I think the star of the show is that. Oh, by the way, when I get this pen from Kingdom Note, they included this tatami mat that you can put your ink bottles on. And that was a really nice touch.
I remember seeing that from the product for photography that was the setup they used.
That one is it's really nice, but the ink itself, I tried out the ink, and it's pretty good. It's a good ink, Jacob. It's this tealish color, with a lot of depth. And it's a nice.
And I think we said that before, but Kingdom Notes Realos, they are not exactly cheap, but for a Realo they're not that expensive.
No. Yes, exactly. So they're definitely much more affordable than some of even the Pro Gears that are coming out.
Yeah, that's true actually. Yeah.
On top of that, Jacob, the shopping doesn't end. Remember I told you that I got a few Pen BBS?
I remember seeing that, yes.
Yeah, so I've got them in now.
The updated 355, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the updated 355. First, I have to say that these updated 355s are really, really good. So if you go on Google, you go on FPN or something, you'll find a post talking about 355 bayonet filler. So that's a user-made modification to the 355 that they kind of put these spokes around the let's say the rod so that it would fit into the washer better.
Ah yes, I've seen that. Yeah.
This is Pen BBS's take on that, and I have to say it works phenomenally. So I have here with me right now. In front of me, I have both the old one and the new one in front of me here. And the old one, what happened is that usually the rod can get stuck in the piston and it would be very, very difficult to remove. So the trick with the old one is that you couldn't, or you were not supposed to screw the rod into the washer fully. But with the new one, because of the mechanism that they use, it's quite ingenious in the sense that even when you screw in the piston, because there's a lock in the washer itself connected to the piston connector, it means that it doesn't, let's say, accidentally engage or refuse to disengage.
Right.
The only difference, I think, in terms of the, let's say, the pen, is that the washer and the connector in the previous one was made of plastic. It made it hard to remove the connector from the pen because it was plastic and because it was kind of soft and it kind of, was screwed into the pen really tight. But I don't know if you can hear it, but this is me engaging the piston in the washer,
I can definitely hear that.
So there's no sound of metal on metal. Now, with the new one, the connector is made of aluminum. Yes. Can you hear this? Yeah, so there's a metal on metal kind of a scraping sound, which takes some time to get used to, but I don't necessarily dislike it.
So I remember when the original 355 came out, there was a big discussion about have they copied, Konid's filling system, and then the people said no, the syringe filler has been around for a long time, and Pen BBS's version is different enough because of the way you lock the piston, so it's not actually the direct copy. But what the discussions I saw this time on FPN suggested that they are a bit more similar to the Konid now than last time. Would you say that's the case?
I think the Konid, I'm actually going to get one in soon, fingers crossed, so I can tell you a bit more about that afterwards. But I think the Konid, yes, it's definitely much more similar because it slots in certainly a lot more similarly. But the Konid one, it's not, they're not like spokes that come out and that cross engage into a mechanism. It's more, I can't really describe it. I'm only looking at photos, but it's more of this like engaging mechanism that is built into the washer that looks kind of like a screw. But the screw is, the threads are really large. And they're not really threads. It's quite hard to explain, but I would encourage everybody to look at, so there are pictures on the Pencil Case blog.
Yeah, saw that.
That really shows what it looks like. It's definitely much more similar. I wouldn't say they're identical.
But it sounds very promising that they fixed or improved on the filling system, because I do remember the first iteration. I got one of the first ones, and I remember that when you push the piston rod back after filling, there was always this worry that you're gonna have this spectacular explosion, right? So you really did not want a pen with an opaque barrel because you couldn't see what was going on.
But I think the problem goes beyond that, because in the old one, the washer locked into the piston connector through friction fit. And that was problematic because in order to disengage something friction fit, you kind of have to put a little bit of oomph, right? And that means you're going to get a lot of sudden spurts of ink.
Yeah, that's too, yeah.
Yeah. And then I remember a lot of people were saying, let's see how long this friction fit lasts in terms of longevity. The pistons are not interchangeable, though.
Oh, really? Okay.
I believe the threading is different.
But there are other parts of the pen that perhaps you could reuse if need be.
Certainly.
And you've been doing some nib experiments as well, right?
Yeah, I've been inspired, let's say, by Annabelle of the FBC podcast, and she works at Applebaum. A few months ago, she showed some prototype nibs that she had made. And there was one particular one that was made from copper that had this hammered metal look. And I really loved that look. It was so unique. I don't think you've seen this in the market. You see it on pen bodies, but you don't really see it on nibs. And so I decided to try it out. So I made a Psi nib. For those of you who don't know, Psi nib is my 3-tine flex nib that I do on Pilot custom 74s and 742s. And I've made a hammered look version of the nib. Did you see this nib yesterday?
No, I don't think I did.
Okay, maybe I was showing it to Alessa only, but the effect I achieved using a Dremel, drilling in little dents all across the nib and then smoothing it out and polishing it, so it gets this kind of rocky effect. This nib, it's quite cool, and if there's enough demand, I might add it to my services for those who might want to look for a hammered look in their nibs.
But would you say this finish changed the behavior or the performance of the nib in any way?
So I have a flat one, so a clean one, and a hammered one, and they perform very, very similarly.
Okay.
Because the kind of dents that I'm making aren't actually that deep, so it's not affecting too much the way that the pen writes.
How long would you say it takes you to do one of these finishes?
I don't want to give too much away, but it's let's say not so difficult. The main difficulty is actually removing the nib imprints. But after they've been done, it's not super difficult to put in this hammered finish. Do you want one for your Nagilat?
But perhaps it could be interesting. but so what's interesting what you said about the engraving. So given that it takes time for you to remove the imprint, does that mean that a laser engraved nib would be less work for you?
Yeah, that's definitely the case. And I can also do, let's say, on dual tone nibs by just doing the gold parts.
Interesting. I completely missed it yesterday. There were so many new pens and inks that I didn't see everything.
That's what happens when you don't see each other for 2 months, right? Speaking of yesterday, you got something from Bokumondoh.
Yes. So I picked up my latest Urushi pen from Hiroko, and this is a Pilot Custom 742 and it's pink. It's a shocking pink, or actually the color is called Botaniro in Japanese, and it's a very unusual and striking color. So the way this design happened was that I asked her if there was any particular technique, anything she wanted to try. She sent me back a picture of a bowl full of very bright Botan Iro Urushi and said, I want to use that. And it's not exactly, your traditional Urushi color, but I was intrigued. I said, sure, go ahead, do that. So what she did was a pen in the Karanuri finish. So Karanuri is one of those 4 traditional Tsugaranuri styles. Tsugaranuri is the style from Aomori in Japan, and the style that she originally trained in and what she knows best. And Karanuri is this version where you have the speckled patterns. There are some variations of that, but basically you have some kind of base color and some speckled pattern. And in this case, you have this Botan Iro pink, and then you have these brown speckles, but there's also pink glitter on it too, because she used so first she did a base layer in brown, and then she put pink aluminum powder on top, and then on top of that she put this Botaniro, and then she sort of carved out these speckles, and then on top of that she sprinkled a little bit of Raden, so you have these small Raden flakes, and then on the cap finial you have this sort of Raden dome. So it's a very striking design, and it's not something I would normally go for, to be honest, but I love what she did, and I love the fact that she's combining something very traditional, that is Karanuri, with something very unusual and sort of experimental, which is this color choice. You saw it yesterday, right?
Yeah, so I think that, Jacob, you are an amazing product photographer. I have to say, this pen, while it looks beautiful in your photography, is even more striking in real life. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it is.
Because I think there's this depth to the Karanuri, where I think she used aluminum powder this time too, right? Yeah, where the black, so you know how some inks, they halo black on the outline? It's kind of like that, but like, let's say this really holographic detail that just, it's so hard to get across in pictures. But this pen is really interesting. The contrast between the finial is also, I think, great. And, she's really pushing the boundaries of what she usually does, especially with your pens, because they're more experimental in nature. So you wouldn't be able to get this as a custom order from Bokumondoh, but if once you kind of work with her a long time, she's more willing to experiment with these kind of wild, crazy finishes. But notice also, Jacob, you didn't talk about the new signature.
Yes. So normally she writes kanji. This time she did just katakana hi, which looks more modern, and I think it's a perfect fit for this pen.
Yeah, I really, really like it. Yeah.
But going back to the glitter parts that are difficult to photograph, so that is caused by the fact that you have this base layer of brown, and then aluminum powder on top, and then she did the pink layer on top, and then she carved out these speckles, and that's why this little brown spot has this glittery pink border, which it looks very unusual.
Yeah, it's definitely it's not a pen that I would expect particularly you to be holding, because you work at a very traditional company. but it's quite striking for sure. It's a unique piece. So we have some news, Jacob. We have yet another Tono and Limbs online event.
Yes, so this was the second. I think the way they phrased it was that this is the second half of the online spring event. And the main difference, so I didn't follow this one as close as I followed the previous one, but as far as I could tell, this one was more focused on glass pens. And they even had this, I think there may be new inks, they call this the crystal line of inks, where it even says clearly on a bottle, or at least on a packaging, it says this is ink for glass pens. I'm not sure if that means it's not usable in a fountain pen. If the event itself was definitely more focused on glass pens, I would say.
Yeah, I think that event was significantly less interesting. It's still organized terribly, just like the previous one. But I found myself less and less compelled to follow them, because it's just, they make it just so difficult to follow along.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't wake up at 9 o'clock on a Saturday to switch into different, Instagram accounts. It's just too much of a mess for me. So I think I need to stave off of these events.
I am looking forward to the next actual, brick and mortar event whenever that happens, because even though they were not the most well organized events, it was still fun. Yeah, these online events aren't quite the same thing.
Yeah.
I appreciate that they're trying to make it work. I understand that this is something new for everyone, and maybe they will get better at it. But I do miss the retail events.
Speaking of retail events, though, we might have a retail event at the end of the month with Wagner.
Yes, so once a year there's this pen trading in Tokyo event. It has been organized by Morrison, as far as I know, for quite a while, but it's not actually a Wagner event, or at least it predated the Wagner. So apparently in 2001 there was this online BBS forum kind of thing where some of the old-timers gathered and discussed fountain pens, and someone came up with the idea of having an event. This year is the 20th time, as far as I know, that is held. And of course, given the virus situation, we were all wondering whether it would happen or not. The latest update from Morrison is that it will happen as planned, but there's going to be a few things, few rules put in place to make sure that, to minimize the risk of virus spreading. One is that it can be a maximum of 50 people in the actual ballroom or whatever it is. So they're going to give you cards. So they have 50 cards, and when you enter the room, you get the card, and when you leave, you hand your card back. So that's how they're going to control the number of people. The other thing they do is that all the vendors are going to be given these face shields. And on top of that, everyone, both the vendors and the attendees, need to wear face masks. And I think also you have to take the temperature in the morning, and probably going to be some kind of hand sanitizer as well. So there's it's going to happen as planned, but in a way that is meant to minimize risk of virus infections.
Yeah, so the event will happen in 2 weeks, which means the next time we record, we'll either have gone or not gone to the event.
That's true, yeah.
So stay tuned for that, because we'll report back. If it does happen, it's quite close to my house. I think I will go. I think I'll see you there too, right? If it
definitely.
If it happens.
Yes.
But if it doesn't, we will see. Bit skeptical, but yeah, it would be interesting. But given that if it happens, Jacob, do you think that we can have Inkanuma this year?
The big question is if there's going to be some kind of big second wave of infections in Tokyo. If that does not happen, then I would expect Inkanuma to happen, because what we all see here is that people are very eager to go back to how things were before, and you see shops opening and so on.
Yeah, and then Inkanuma was already divided into time slots, into different days.
That's true,
and you could only... So maybe they'll have more time slots. With less products each time slot, and limited to the number of people, the entrances. So we'll see. We'll see. But hopefully it does. I'm not confident that it will, but yeah.
Yeah, because I remember last time, as you entered this event hall, everyone was just running toward Usagiya's and Kobayashi's booths in particular, because they had these small Tamiya bottles, and everyone wanted these Tamiya bottles. There was definitely no social distancing last time. They were fighting over these little bottles. So we'll see how that changes this year.
And we have some other news. I didn't notice this before. I'm not sure if it's like news, but Kingdom Note has a new collaboration. So it's called the Shinkai. With they say the Urushi group that's doing it is called Wajimaya Zenni, and they actually do quite a few pens. Wajima Zenni. I've seen them in Tsutaya at Ginza 6 with these really, really magnificent makie pens. Have you taken a look at these?
If it's what I think it is, it's the one that is based on Eboya, right?
Yeah, so they're these Eboya hakobunes. And the makie of like these fish.
Right.
What do you think of those?
Yeah, they look beautiful. I can't remember what the price was. I imagine, given the base cost of an Eboya is already quite high, and the Wajima style of urushi is considered among best, the top ones in Japan, right? So I'm sure that this group knows how to charge for their work. So I can't imagine this pens being cheap.
It's 352,000 Japanese yen.
Yeah.
They are stunning, but I don't know. It's a bit pricey, and I think these are really geared towards collectors. But if you like makie and you like fish, these pens they're beautiful. They are different. They take Bach nibs, so they're also fairly easy to swap out into whatever nibs that you like.
I'm curious about the decision to use an Eboya as a base pen. I understand that, the traditionally many pens were, urushi over ebonite, and I understand that perspective, but it's quite an expensive pen to start from, right?
It depends how they're collaborating. If they're buying from at a wholesale price. But I think because Eboyas, I don't know if you noticed, they're very symmetrical. Yeah, it might be because they're so symmetrical, they're easier to paint on and work with. Because I'm looking at the Kingdom Note mail magazine, so they have this link, and they have these little drawings of how they plan to do the makie, and it's split into 3 different panels, or rather 6 panels, so 3 for the barrel and 3 for the cap. And it seems like the largeness of the pen and the symmetry of the pen helps them plan this out, and possibly makes it easier for them to do it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So there's one more piece of news that I wanted to talk about, which is also Wagner related. So earlier this week, Morrison announced a new Wagner pen. So this is a green Platinum 3776 with gold trims and with a C nib, so a coarse nib. It's not actually a Wagner pen, but it's a pen to commemorate the 2nd anniversary of Morrison's fountain pen clinic in Mita, but that's sort of so close to Wagner that it's kind of hard to say what is what. But yeah, it's not. The pen doesn't say Wagner, but it's effectively a Wagner pen, right? And this pen has been planned for a while, and I first heard about it last autumn because the main selling point of this pen is the nib. So the pen looks kind of unremarkable, but if you look at the nib, the photos of the nib that Morrison has posted, you will see that there's this Wagner style engraving, and it says BS, which is perhaps a bit unfortunate, but there's a reason for that. So BS actually stands for Batlev shape. And
wait, sorry, what does it stand for?
Batlev. So my knowledge of Star Trek is a bit limited, but I was told that Batlev, or however you pronounce it, is the sword used by the Klingons. And it turns out that Morrison is quite a Star Trek fan, and
he's a Trekkie.
Yes, that seems to be the case. Yes, the reason why he came up with the name was that basically he needed a new name for this grind for reasons that may become more obvious later. But this will not be sold with a regular C-nib. So it will actually come with a custom grind. Actually 3 custom grinds, so Butlerf S, M, and B. And we can't say, or we're not supposed to say exactly what a grind is going to look like, and we're also not supposed to say who will do the grind. But let's just say that anyone who is interested in Asian calligraphy will be very interested in these pens. The reason why the pens have normal gold trims instead of rose gold trim, which is more common with Wagner pens, is that in order to do the grind they need to do, if you have a rose gold plated nib, plating may fall off because of the way you're going to do this grind. So it will be a somewhat unremarkable pen with a very interesting nib grind, and it's going to be available in August. And usually the way Morrison does this, he never explains that well in advance, but usually there's a pre-sale for Wagner members for like 1 day or 2, and after that anyone who's interested can just email him and place an order.
So he posted the picture on Instagram.
Yes.
But his caption talks about a different pen.
But that's also the case with the blog. So he posted a blog post where, the first 2/3 of the blog was about the last few Wagner 2020 pens are now gone, and so he had allowed Lichtop to sell them, and now they're sold out. And then almost like a PS in the end, here is exciting new information about the next pen I'm working on.
So I think the blue one, the carrot in the nose one.
Yeah.
I'm reading his blog, and it says he's reserved a few even for tips, and a few for the pen trading.
Yeah, originally he had also reserved a few for I think Tainan Pen Show and for Seoul Pen Show, but right. I think they were both cancelled.
Yeah.
So he started selling them again on his blog, and now he sold 20 of them through this Lichtop store, which is technically run by Tomoko, but he's kind of behind the scenes involved there.
Yeah, this whole thing is wrapped in mystery. I know we're back in our Mori bashing segment now, but I mean, I just wish he could write, like normal person. I wish he, yeah. But it's interesting though. You mentioned something about the rose gold plating, because when we were talking with Alessa from Inky Rocks, and she used to be super into jewelry.
Yeah.
She mentioned that in jewelry, pink gold is pink gold. It's not plated.
Right.
But on the blog, it specifically says pink gold plating.
Yes.
So I wonder what's going on. I mean, do you think it could be just pink gold? Do you think that's possible?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just plating. But what I'm not sure about is whether he's asking Platinum to do it, or there are some Wagner members including Mart or someone who's doing these platings. Because if that's the case, then that would explain why it's plated.
Yeah. And speaking of Mart, did you see that rose gold Decimo that he did?
No, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, if you go on his Instagram, he recently plated the entire trim of a Decimo to be rose gold, because there are no rose gold plating for caplesses. So right now it's the third picture in his Instagram.
Ah, yes. Actually, sorry. I thought Kakimori in my head for this is a Decimo. Yeah, I remember seeing that, and this was made for Kaho Bungo. Yeah, I saw this.
It's kind of cool, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, white and rose gold. It's an excellent combination. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, so definitely he's cool. But sorry, going back again to Wagner and Mr. Mori.
Yeah.
And then also, I think, relating to your Botan Urushi pen, Mr. Mori has also been experimenting with some neon colors.
Yes. Yeah, so he spent, I think, the last year. I mean, he has had a big project going on for the last year or so, right? So he commissioned a number of brass pens from Fine Writing International. This just cylinder shaped without any facets. And I'm not sure if it was originally the idea or if he came up with this later, but he came up with this idea that he wanted to do his own coating, or he wanted to make some kind of antique look on it. So he's been playing with various dangerous liquids and things, various ways to make this look like antique, similar to actually what you've done previously too.
Yeah, so actually, I don't think I talked to you about this, but he got the idea from looking at what I did. Because when Keiko went to see him after I had done my Atlantis mod, and he even wrote on his blog, he said, some random gaijin foreigner guy has been playing around with these brass pens, gave me an idea to kind of and he said give it an antique finish.
Yeah.
Well, it would be nice if he just gave it an antique finish, but he went off the deep end.
Yeah, he did. He tried. I mean, if you look at his blog for the last year, every second entry has been about the latest in his long adventure, and eventually he came up with a way of doing this that he was himself satisfied with. But then for the last few weeks or so, he suddenly decided that some of those pens should not have an antique finish, but he should have some kind of custom lacquer. Or actually, maybe it was first an antique finish, and then on top of that, some bright lacquer. So there was one in particular that he posted that had this sort of rusty trims, but then there was a bright pink lacquer on top.
Yeah, do you know if he uses this? I think he uses spray lacquer.
I think he said that. Yeah, I think he's doing that on his balcony or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes. But he's gone off the deep end with this one, guys.
But I saw this one in the wild, or I saw it on some other Instagram accounts. I think he's managed to sell at least one of them, perhaps.
Yeah, which is crazy to me. But different strokes for different folks.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I think the last thing. Or two last things on our news segment. Well, we've gone really long. But the new Manyos, did you see the new Manyo inks?
I saw that there were new inks. I didn't look at the colors.
So they're releasing these new Manyo inks. Again, Manyo inks are for outside export only, so we won't be receiving any of those. But from what I can tell, these colors are much more standard than what you had last time. Last time you had, in particular, the Haha and the Nekoyanegi, I think, were the really beautiful ones that people were looking for. This time, they have more Manyo inks based on different flowers. I think, in particular, I think I like the Sakura and the Nadeshiko. I think are really nice.
Right.
The Konagi is also very nice. The greens, I think, are a bit less remarkable than the... Especially, I think the Nadeshiko is really beautiful. But we'll see how it goes. I think these will be popular outside of Japan, too. And I think people in Japan will try to get them.
Which might not be that hard, because I remember, was it last year? I think they were available at Okamoto.
Yeah, at the Tono Lim's event.
Yeah.
I think Mr. Lim brought some.
That might be it.
Yeah, from Korea.
Yeah.
And Alessa got a bottle of Haha.
Of course she did.
And then the last thing is, have you been looking at Toma Pens' Instagram?
I remember seeing one post about some Kubo-inspired grind.
Yeah.
If that's what you meant.
Yeah, so he posted this picture, and Mr. Kubo does 4 tine music nibs. So he, inspired by Kubo, decided to also add cut ins. So he has 2 extra breather holes, and he cut in the nib. I'm guessing that this will be quite flexible as a nib, but what do you think about these nibs?
So I wonder if it's a little bit like King Eagle and King Cobra, in that people want to try to recreate them because they're so rare, not because they're necessarily the ultimate writing experience. So and they do look pretty cool, right? And you said that before, and I have to agree that they do look pretty cool. I remember trying one of Kubo-san's nibs before. I wasn't super impressed by how it wrote, so I think there are more sort of collector's items.
Yeah,
and I can understand why you would.
Definitely.
You would want to just get one in your collection.
Yeah, definitely. Looking at these nibs, they kind of remind me of these cartoon character faces. Yeah, they're cute. But as you say, I'm not sure how, they're signature nibs, I guess. So they're not something that you're going to use in your daily life.
Right.
Yeah. And then to what was supposed to be our main segment, Jacob, we went somewhere yesterday.
So Kakimori opened. They reopened after the lockdown, I think from June 2nd. And we went there yesterday. So they have this new system in place where you have to book in advance, and you have this 1 hour time slots, and it can be at most 4 people at any given time slot. And so this we and Koe went at the 12 around noon. It was a lot of fun. It's to go back to Kakimori after a long time. It was nice to see the pen friends, of course. I enjoyed it a lot. For me, I mean, the reason why I wanted to go to Kakimori in particular was that I wanted to try their inks. So they've sold inks for a while, but I think fairly recently they switched to a line of pigmented inks that are made by Turner, a paint company in Japan. And I've heard good things about these Turner-made pigmented inks from our friends Alessa and Koe and others. I was keen on trying them for myself. And of course, the main selling point of Kakimori's main selling point is that you can make your own notebook, right? So you go there and you choose your own paper. You can try. I think they have like 8 different types of paper. You can try them all, see which one you like, and then you choose 30, 60, 90 sheets of your favorite paper. You choose your cover and your binding, and then you give it to them, and they take in 1 hour later you have your own custom notebook. I went there with the intention of making my own notebook, but then I realized that I've just started using this plotter system Techo. So I only really want paper for my system Techo. So I went there and got some bank paper from for my system Techo. So I think I paid like 200 yens for 30 or 50 sheets of bank paper. This was B5 size, I believe, which is fairly reasonable, I believe. What did you get?
I didn't get anything.
Really?
Yeah, I was good. I got one of those maps that they had for free. Those really cool ones.
Yes.
Yeah, but I tried the bank paper, the Fool's paper, and the Tomoe River paper. I also tried this thing they called comic paper, but it was comically bad. But,
that was very surprisingly bad.
Yeah, it was awful with spread. But between the 3, the comic, the Fool, the bank, and the Tomoe River, I definitely understand why bank paper is much more popular in Asia, because I think it dries much faster. And it absorbs the ink into the paper without feathering. And it also has less show-through. But I think color shows up brighter on Tomoe River. And it was a good, let's say, experiment for me to reaffirm that I quite like and enjoy Tomoe River as a paper.
Did you ever try the Yupo papers, or basically an aldrafil?
Yeah, I've tried Yupo papers before and I hated them, so I didn't even bother this time. It's like plastic rubbish. It's like writing on a receipt.
Ink looks pretty interesting. I mean, it doesn't... Yeah, it has a very unique look, but you get a lot of shading and sheen on this paper, but it never dries, so it's not the most practical paper. But yeah, you talked about how bank paper is more popular. So they had this. We talked about they have this little paper testing area, right? And for each paper, they had this little description. What is the name of the paper? What is the history? And then they said how good this paper is for fountain pen, for ballpoint, and for pencils. So you have these little marks, like triangle for maybe not so good, circle for good, and then double circle for like fantastic, right? And Tomoe River had a single circle. Both bank paper and OK Fools had a double circle. So in their view, both are superior for fountain pens.
Yeah, and I think that's mainly to do with the dry time, isn't it? So we can really see that in this market, dry time is a huge factor.
Yeah. Well, actually, there was one more thing I got as I was standing waiting to pay. I picked up this small memo pad. So there's this company called Masuya or Asakusa Masuya, and they make these monokaki notebooks, which I think you don't like. But they also make these Japanese writing papers like Genko Yoshi. Mm-hmm. And here they also sold this new product, which is basically a memo pad size version of their Genko Yoshi, so their writing paper. And I bought it just because it kind of looked nice. It can be a nice prop, I guess. But the paper is fantastic. I absolutely love it. I just tried it a little bit, but you get nice sheen. There's absolutely no feathering or bleed through, even with my double broad Mont Blanc nib. So it was just like an impulse buy, and I was really happy with this paper.
You know, we're not familiar to impulse buys at all.
It happens.
But Jacob, I'm curious to know you bought it in B5, right? And your plotter is what size? It's Bible size?
It's Bible size, yes.
So how does it fit in your plotter?
I haven't looked at that yet because I haven't tried to cut it yet, but I'm assuming I'm going to have this. I'm going to have some leftover paper that I can use for maybe ink samples or chromatography or whatever I choose to use it for. So it's going to be some waste for sure.
So you're going to cut it by yourself, or are you going to get a machine to do it?
I'm going to cut it by myself. I actually, inspired by you, I got my own paper cutter and like hole punch. So I have the whole kit.
Oh, you got the paper cutter too?
Yes.
Oh man, I might need to get one of those. Yeah, that's yeah. I was wondering because they only had B size paper, they didn't have A size paper, and so I was hesitant about buying any paper that didn't fit because I don't have the cutter.
Right, but these cutters, I mean, the one I got probably isn't the fanciest one, but I paid something like 2,000 yen for it on Amazon, and it works.
Yeah, I mean, as long as it works, we're not, professional. But I see some on Yahoo Auctions that's like 8,000 yen for like industrial cutters.
Yeah, but they're pretty big too. The serious ones.
Well, I do have an extra room.
There you go. You can have your own little printing house.
No, I would. Somebody would not be very pleased with me.
I can imagine.
I think what struck me the most about Kakimori is how well the store is built and is thought out of. It's very well designed, and as you pointed out to me when we met up, it seems like they had a renovation because from what I've seen in the past, this is actually my first time going to the main store of Kakimori, but from what I've seen in the past, they used to be more like an actual workshop that they opened up to the public. Now it's a full-blown store with really well merchandised products, really nice. You can tell that it's not really for fountain pen lovers, but the people who run it love fountain pens.
Yeah.
And so there were all of these different kinds of products, and they had a letterpress there too. So I'm wondering if they would take say custom requests for business cards or whatever. That could be interesting. It could be something that I look into as well. But I noticed something that I was really drawn to were their letters, their envelopes.
Oh, they were very pretty, yes.
Yeah, so I might get some of those in the future if I need to write some letters, and they're quite close to where I live, so fortunately for me.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, it's very well curated. So they don't have, they don't have that many products. It's not like you go into Don Quixote and you're overwhelmed by shelves of tightly packed stuff, right? It's very tasteful. There's a carefully selected, interesting products, and almost everything is actually interesting. So it's a very dangerous place to go to.
Yeah, they had these Tetsubo regular pens. So standard pens that the gel pens that took I think 4C and G2 refills that they looked really, really beautiful. But the Tetsubo holders, the nib holders, I think they got a bit cheaper.
Really? Yeah, I remember at the Tokyo Pen Show they were a bit expensive.
Yeah, my memory was 30,000 yen. But when I saw them yesterday, I saw 20,000 yen.
Okay.
Yeah. So might need to get one for myself.
If you have to get a ball pen, yeah.
Yeah. Or a nib holder. Do like those.
That's true.
So going to the Q&A this week, we have an interesting question. So we are asked, what does the Japanese fountain pen scene think about the huge demand for the Japanese specialty nibs? What do you think?
I'm not entirely sure I agree with the premise of the question, because I'm not sure if there is a huge demand. Obviously, in our circles, there are definitely enthusiasts that really like the Naginatas and Fudes and Concords and Cross Points and so on. I get the impression that they're selling more of those in Asia, and I don't think that these Japanese nibs are nearly as popular as grinds like Talik and Stub. So I'm not sure they're that popular, and I think that I think there's a huge Asian market, but I'm not sure there's a big Western market. What do you think?
I think there are two parts to this question, or two ways that I want to answer it. First, I don't think the Japanese fountain pen scene thinks about the Western scene. Like it's not in their heads,
right? So
they're not, oh, this is really popular in whatever. They don't really think that. So I think in a sense there's not too much. There's not like a sense that, oh, they're fetishizing these items. On the other hand, I think that if anything, they think, oh, of course they would love the Naginata. Why wouldn't they? I think that's more of the attitude. The second is, as you said, I think the main demand is in Hong Kong and Taiwan.
Yeah.
Where we know a lot of high dollar collectors are really into, especially Naginatas, chasing all sorts of Naginatas. To really up the demand. And even I think regular fountain pen users in Japan, I would say that 95% of them have never tried writing with a Naginata nib before.
That sounds quite possible, yeah.
Yeah. The most popular grind is FM. So the demand, let's say perceived demand is a result of the lack of supply, because there was only Nagahara who was really grinding until he got his assistants to help him grind the Naginata. I think it's more marketing, but yeah, I'm not sure that there is a huge amount of thought dedicated to that.
Yeah, I think the main thing would be that if there are Japanese collectors that complain about the competition that they face on Yahoo auctions, but I think that might be, as you say, equally Hong Kong and Taiwan, maybe even more.
Yeah, for sure. I have noticed though, a lot of Western enthusiasts are now trying to grind their own.
Yeah.
I'm seeing now, even just a few minutes ago, Taminu Studio from Instagram. He's made his own naginata-like grind, which is quite interesting, I think, for me personally, to see this evolution of or this increase of interest in these grinds. And I think it will be one of the biggest grinds this year.
So one thing I find interesting about this is that, you know, going back to our favorite topic, Mori-san, he wrote recently on a blog post that even though he's been doing nib grind for, you know, decades, he admits that he cannot do a naginata toge. He has tried, but he cannot do naginata toge. He has his own grind that's called nata toge, which is not quite the same, but he admits, you know, I tried, I can't make it. So if someone with this much experience cannot make it, it must be difficult, I guess.
What do you think about the ones that I do for you?
I'm not sure if I can fully appreciate a naginata toge. I mean, I use them as a rounded architect, and in that sense they are perfect for me. I love writing with them, but I don't write, you know, Japanese calligraphy with them.
Yeah, because I was having a conversation with somebody else, and I think, you know, we've mentioned this in the past, but with the naginata, every grinder's take on it is different.
Yeah,
including within Sailor, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and even the same person over time.
So I think it's quite hard to say you can or cannot do it. I think that it's, you know, how can it be defined like that? That's something that I hesitate a bit. I think there are ones that write well and ones that don't. But each grinder has a different take on it. So I know, for example, Masayama has his take on it, which I think Nagahara respects as well.
Yeah.
And I was talking to this person. He said, he had a look at Masayama's grind and said, yeah, that's how Mike Masayama does it, and that's perfect the way that Mike does it.
It probably helps that Masayama has been able to train with Nagahara Senior and with Kawaguchi as well. Yeah,
for sure. All right, so that's been episode 7. Thank you again so much for listening to the podcast. We really, really, really appreciate you, and we've got a lot of really positive feedback in regards to our show so far. If you have your own feedback for us, feel free to contact me at Tokyo Station Pens on Instagram. You can send me a direct message. You can send me an email at tokyostationpens@gmail.com. And Jacob, can they contact you through your website?
Yeah, it's the same thing. I have a contact form on my website, foodafan.com.
Yep. So we want to continue to hear from you. You, the listeners, really give us a lot of motivation and a lot of great feedback that we work off of. So thank you very, very much. Hopefully you will tell a friend, tell a family member, tell somebody you know at work who likes pens, and help us grow our audience and grow our reach. Until next time then, which will be about the pen trading event if it happens. We'll see you around. My name is CY. You can find me at Tokyo Station Pens on Instagram or at tokyostationpens.com.
And my name is Jacob, and I'm Foodafan on Instagram, and I have a blog at foodafan.com.
And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.